Our nation faces unprecedented global security threats. The call to strengthen our defense has never been more urgent. Here in Washington this August, NDIA answers that call with leading government industry and university experts, meeting here to match threats to capabilities.
Everybody you talk to at the NDIA Emerging Technologies conference is really motivated to understand these technologies and issues better so that they're more capable to deal with them as new problems arise.
Can I take your information?
For NDIA government partners, these conferences are the most efficient and cost-effective gatherings to discover state-of-the-art solutions under one roof.
It is indeed. I'd say it's a one-stop shop, especially with the focus on the manufacturing industrial base.
By coming to this conference is get to talk to many industry partners. If they tried to do this and go to each and every of the companies of the 1,000 people who are here this year, you can't do it. But on a clock where you can do that, come here 2.5 days and really have that interaction, start the conversation. NDIA, one of our big things is keeping those conversations going.
Industry, academia, and government decision makers collaborating in real time on the most challenging national security issues.
You don't win by playing defense in tech. You have to aggressively move forward. You have to cannibalize your own product with a better product before somebody else cannibalizes you. You win by creating something that the other guy can't keep up with.
The Engineering Research and Development Center says the NDIA Expo member connections help everyone advance their technology.
It allows them to see things that maybe they didn't know was out there. Then it also gives me the opportunity to talk about, well, there's 6 other laboratories that we have.
We're excited to be here. It's a great way to connect with people that we haven't connected to before.
This is a great example of when you can bring kind of all 3 parties together.
Decision makers, innovators, researchers, one-on-one breakout sessions.
It was more than 200 projects.
All under one roof.
Unclassified to secret to top secret.
The nation's premier military and technology leaders collaborate to bring lethality, readiness, and overmatch capabilities to our warfighters and the civilians who support them.
So you'll see that cool university working on the latest quantum computing. You'll see some small business who's turning that quantum computing into an actual product. You'll see a big old system integrator, a big defense prime who's turning it into a big system.
Join us at the NDIA Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference and Exhibition, August 27 to 29 in Washington, D.C. to be part of the mission-critical, legal, ethical, and efficient dialogue that will shape our nation's security future. Visit NDIATechExpo.org to learn more.
Hello and welcome to the Emerging Tech Horizons podcast. I'm Arun Seraphin, Executive Director of NDIA's Emerging Technologies Institute. Today we're going to discuss the role of NATO Defense Innovation through the NATO Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, or DIANA, which plays a role in spurring innovation across the NATO alliance. Additionally, we're going to talk about NATO DIANA's programming at the upcoming NDIA Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference and Exhibition. So in this episode, we're going to try to answer questions about DIANA's mission, how they fit within the DoD R&D portfolio and efforts, how they encourage practically how industry works on the development of critical emerging technologies, and how they partner with industry across the whole spectrum of NATO member countries. To discuss all of this, we're joined today by Thomas McSorley, who's the General Counsel for NATO Diana. But before we get started, I want to announce an exciting addition to the 2025 Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference. NDIA and ETI are hosting a multi-day hackathon to deliver innovative solutions to our partners across the Department of Defense. This global information dominance event will connect technologists in DC to frontline problems. If you're interested in participating, please make sure to sign up at the link in the description, NDIATechExpo.org. Tom, welcome to the Emerging Tech Horizons podcast.
Arun, thanks so much for having me today, and I look forward to discussing Diana and the wider NATO innovation ecosystem.
It's great. So to begin, tell us about your background and how you got to NATO Diana.
Sure. So I spent about 20 years in Washington as an attorney for most of my career, focused on technology issues, defense, procurement, national security, working on a range of topics that I know touch on a lot of your constituents, including export controls, investment controls, CFIUS reviews, and acquisition and the like. I had the opportunity to work at SpaceX for a few years as counsel there, which was a very exciting place and an exciting time for the company. It was just after SpaceX started landing rockets. And so the opportunity to go see some of those rockets land was well, for me, as someone who grew up watching the space shuttle launches, just a real treat. And then eventually I made my way to a software startup that was focused on defense applications called Rebellion, and did that for a couple of years in Washington. But during that time, I had been tracking NATO's developments in this space. And so the opportunity to apply for the general counsel role came open, and I convinced my family it was a good idea for us to move to London for a few years to help start this agency, which is a kind of startup within NATO, which I think is a really unique opportunity. And so 2 years ago, really this month, so just 2 years ago to next week, I moved the family over here, and based in London, we've been setting up Diana ever since.
So I'm curious, I'm not a lawyer. You're a public sector government employee of a government organization called NATO, which means you're not a U.S. government employee. Do I have that right?
Correct. So, yeah, I mean, we won't get it, I think, too much into the complexities of how you go work for NATO, but there are a few different ways that happens. So you can be a seconded U.S. government employee. You can be part of the diplomatic mission to NATO. And then there are also direct hires. So I was directly hired by the organization, obviously work closely with U.S. government officials as well as officials from lots of NATO countries. But I am, yes, as a technical matter, an employee of the NATO organization and of Diana.
So for the listeners who are not familiar with that organization, tell us what NATO Diana is and what the organization is doing to support the transatlantic alliance.
So I like to say that Diana is NATO's innovation engine. And what I mean by that is it has a very specific function that's articulated in the charter that was agreed by all of the NATO nations back in 2021. And at the time, that was 30 nations, because since then we've had Sweden and Finland join the alliance, and they've become important members of our, obviously, of the Diana board and of our efforts. But the charter gives us a clear structure to basically put out challenges to industry, focusing on non-traditional suppliers, I think, as we call them in this kind of arena. We maybe call them startups or scale-ups when we're speaking at South by Southwest. But we want to find new industry players by giving them challenges that articulate, defense and security needs, capability needs, but they do so thinking about effects and outcomes. So the focus here is articulating a problem. And then we have a accelerator program as well as a set of funding authorities to give those companies the chance to iterate their technology alongside NATO, the allies, end users, experts. And then from there, we have the ability to work with allies that are interested in developing prototypes off the back of the solutions that have been proposed. And then even at the NATO level, the ability to transition those prototypes, if they're successful, to the benchmarks that are set for them, into the opportunity for follow-on production contracts through NATO's procurement agency, as well as the Communications and Information Agency. So it's really it's a pipeline approach. There's a clear structure to it. And so I think one thing to understand about Diana is that it's not really a policy-focused agency, and it's not even what you might think of as a more generic or broad innovation agency that kind of has lots of different functions and efforts undergoing. I mean, we have lots of different ways we put out the challenges and target different technologies, but we have a very focused structure around pulling in those non-traditionals and then getting outcomes into the supply chain.
And if I was speaking in TRL levels,
yeah,
where do you kind of bucket yourself in TRL levels?
Yeah, so our focus is TRL 4 to 7. I would say that if we get the opportunity, to, if we have a proposal come in that is very strong, that has a higher TRL, but maybe from a company that is, outside of the defense market, but looking to take that solution and transition it into the supply chain, I think that is possibly a good candidate for Diana as well. We do shy away from lower TRL solutions because we're really not set up to fund early stage R&D. So when we have proposals for lower TRL solutions that are powerful, we do have vectors that we can share those ideas, those solutions with our stakeholders, and there may be other funding opportunities for that kind of R&D, but we're really not an R&D shop. We are focused on transitioning from a 4 or 5 up, as I said, to a 7, get it to a prototype, and then get it out to partners to get it onto the battlefield.
So then mapping kind of onto DoD R&D landscape.
Yeah.
I think of you then as sort of late stage, what goes on at the service laboratories as they try to transition to programs of record. Later stage, what goes on at a DARPA as it's trying to transition. And then plus what we've seen recently is the Defense Innovation Unit Strategic Capabilities Office trying to pull in 6s and 7, TRL 6, 7 kind of things and push them into programs. Does that mapping kind of make sense?
I think that sounds right. If you look at our charter and the related, material that was developed around the creation of Diana, clearly the crafters, and by the way, I didn't have anything to do with this, so I can give them praise, and I'm not praising myself. They did a great job of thinking about how innovation functions throughout the alliance, and I think pull in elements. You see. Some of the vocabulary that's used has some of that later stage DARPA language, as well as, yes, to your point, a lot that comes from thinking around DIU, and DIU is a very close and important partner of ours, and they support us at the U.S. national level. So that sounds right to me.
So you mentioned you work with DIU. What other U.S. defense or non-defense organizations do you partner with most frequently?
So we have a really exciting network approach to how we actually get things done. So, and again, just tooting our own horn, I think Diana is a very efficient use of funds because it's not a very big budget. I'm not sure. I guess I'll shy away from using numbers because I don't know how that's shared within the larger alliance ecosystem. But we're not a very big program in terms of our own operating budget. What we have is the ability to network with a huge array of stakeholders, commercial entities, as well as quasi-public-private entities. So in the U.S., to your question, that looks like, number one, yes, working with DIU, working with R&E, and speaking to DARPA, speaking to other service elements, as well as the different end user communities that talk to us about needs they have. So we collect all of that input. We also, in the past, have had good engagements with organizations like the Naval Postgraduate School, thinking about some of our efforts. So there's a lot of the public sector engagement, of course. Then we also have a network of test centers. And so in the United States, those include FFRDCs like APL, Johns Hopkins, as well as Lincoln Lab, and also MITRE. So we work with those entities and similar entities, both commercial and public-private, across all 32 NATO countries to basically have places where we can take the solutions, work with the end users, figure out what those benchmarks are, and get those technologies developed and then vetted, to then move into operational experimentation and other opportunities to get them tested by end users, and as I said, fielded. And then I think, just to round out the answer to that question, in addition to all those public and public-private kind of entities, we work with a huge array of commercial entities. So obviously all of the innovators that we work with, so to date we have about 120 companies in our cohort. The US by number, I believe, is the biggest country for our cohort, obviously given the power of the US tech ecosystem. But then we also work with a huge investor network, because we're looking to get trusted investment into the innovators we work with, as well as existing industry players, because they're really important to integrate the technologies, to give us feedback, and to work with us on a lot of the programs that we're working in and with. The innovators are providing a technology or a component level solution into a larger platform. So we kind of work with the whole ecosystem, and that is what's exciting about Diana, because we have this incredible network to draw on.
So you have this important mission, and all of these government partners who are in the end customers. I guess all the members of the NATO alliance are potential customers for your products, the technologies that you've partnered to develop. And you've got that vast array of partners, whether they're U.S. government organizations, allied partner nation government organizations, like you said, industry or commercial sector or private capital folks. So what's the set of tools then that you would use to piece all that together and deliver emerging technologies to all of those forces across the alliance?
Yeah. So the first, for the most part, the first step is collecting the demand signals from across the alliance. So I think one of the really exciting and valuable pieces of Diana is the fact, number one, that we are a NATO entity, and so we are not we're not tied to any one nation. And so, as much as obviously the alliance, we're an alliance of 32 very friendly nations together. There's always the question of how the pie is divided among industry. I think the first thing we can do, rationally, is look at the planning processes, look at the NATO level about what are the capability gaps, what are the solutions that are going to be game changers, both the lower end as well as the stuff that's on the market that we can pull in. And we aggregate that demand and then develop those challenges. To date, we've run those challenge calls. They're for the most part very broad. If you go onto our website, you'll see this year we did 10 challenges. We're in the process of evaluating, I think the exact number is not released, but thousands of proposals. And then we'll basically, using the knowledge of what those critical gaps are, we can take those proposals, and then we're going to build a cohort of 150 new companies this year that will hopefully be on the path to filling some of those gaps. So I think that's the number one tool, is the use of the challenges to aggregate. The second thing we do have is joint funding from all 32 allies to immediately give a boost to the companies we bring into the cohort. So right now the model is 100,000 euros for each company. I think both the timing, the scope, and the funding model are all things that we'll continue to think about as we go from kind of our initial stand up to really building out the program fully. But right now it's a one size fits all, 100,000 euros to iterate. And then we have a network of accelerators across the alliance, including PNW MAC and Mass Challenge. PNW MAC is in Seattle in the Northwest, and then Mass Challenge is outside of Boston. And we have accelerator sites throughout the alliance. The companies then go there and they network with each other. They get access to a mentor and expert pool that we've put together to help them on everything from business planning to legal issues. I'm excited we're building a legal network to support. And then, as I said, the test center network to get them some additional funding, which we have to get them into those test centers. And then the two other main pieces, we have something called the Trusted Capital Database, which is the term in our charter. We're coming up with a better term for what we want to build out of that database, which is really a community of investors that meet our security and also mission alignment requirements, and then have a venue where they can connect in at a very valuable way with the members of our cohort to get them private capital. And then finally, we have something called the Rapid Adoption Service. And that is the last piece, which is where we can then work with the stakeholders among all the allies that recognize, hey, we've got a solution here. We want to see where this goes. Let's set a benchmark for it, get a prototype, and then validate that prototype. And again, hopefully get the opportunity to then field it into the supply chain.
I think you also have a partnership with the NATO Innovation Fund. Is that right?
So the NATO Innovation Fund, I call them our cousin. They were created at the same time as Diana, and they are a venture capital fund that's been funded by 24 of the 32 allies. So the United States is actually not a funder of the NIF. So the NIF is essentially the first among equals in that trusted capital network I talked about. So we do work closely with them. We obviously know who their funders are. They're very mission aligned. They're very supportive for us in reaching out to the venture capital community. So they're an important partner. They are a private VC fund, and they don't cover all of Diana's territory. So yeah, the best way to think about them is the very first member of our trusted capital network, and a close ally in getting private capital to recognize the opportunity in defense, which I think is something that the U.S. is ahead on. But as we talked about before, which may come up again, there's a lot of opportunity in Europe as well that I think VCs and other investors are waking up to. And so our goal with the NIF is to really build a community that together can understand this market and can provide funding for the technology we need.
How do you set the priorities for what you're going to focus all those different tools on? I guess you're receiving demand signal in DoD speak in the form of requirements or urgent need statements or something like that. And then you're receiving that from all of the partner nations, and somehow you're turning that into a set of priority efforts.
Yeah, so it's certainly one of the biggest challenges is the prioritization piece. So I think the first few years we benefited from lots of attention and enthusiasm. So we've gotten lots of input as to what is needed. But to your point, then taking that input and figuring out where do we target first is something that we rely on a fantastic team that we've built at Diana that spans both technologists as well as end user experts to take that and prioritize, feed that back into the ecosystem through what we call the strategic direction, which is an agreed document among all the allies that kind of gives us a set of focus areas. But the exciting thing I will say is that this iteration, so now we've gone through one strategic direction, we're now working on another strategic direction because of where the alliances come in thinking about innovation and about what we call, I think at the US level is referred to really as transition, but at the NATO level we call it adoption. There is now a big, high policy level focus on adoption. During the summit in June, the allies agreed on something called the Rapid Adoption Action Plan. And all of that is very helpful because what it's doing is influencing the planning processes to think about how to incorporate innovative solutions, you mentioned requirements, to articulate requirements and needs more in effects-based language rather than prescriptive specifications, which, as you know, I think from your background and certainly your listeners know, is a key way to potentially open up the market to more novel approaches. I've gone a lot of routes. I think the bottom line is that we so far rely on our stakeholders to provide that prioritization. But I think you'll see in our next strategic direction, as well as our future challenges, we're going to be experimenting with a range of scopes as well as time frames to get the best value out of Diana.
Yeah, we'll get to the acquisition interface in a second. That's, what's French for Valley of Death. We'll get there. But for now, I'm really curious about the challenges. In my mind, that sort of it echoes to what we do in the DoD context, technology prizes or hackathons these days. And is that what when you talk about a challenge, is that what a challenge is? How do you use that tool?
Yeah, not quite. It's really more of I think the way we've framed it and set it up is more of a problem-based procurement, really. So or in the EU parlance, there are structures called competitive dialogues, or sometimes it's referred to as dynamic sourcing. In the US, it has flavors of what you might call another transaction and OTA process, where the key with the challenge is that we want to articulate, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the outcomes we need? And then having the industry start to give us ideas about how to solve those, rather than giving out a specification and asking for, a response to an RFP that's very structured. So what we do is ask for proposals that are fairly short and low cost to deliver, that articulate the technology, and then also the business approach and the application. And the idea there is that since Diana has such a limited number of places in its cohort, we want to find what are those technology proposals that are going to give us the best solution, again, from a technological standpoint, but that also have a business, a pathway to sustainability, let's call it that. And then again, if it's a great idea, but it doesn't have that pathway to sustainability, it's probably a good candidate for another kind of program, maybe like a grant, or some other kind of R&D based or innovation based funding. Whereas what we're looking for is to give innovators that have a pathway. They don't need to necessarily have a lot of funding so far. They don't need a lot of customers. But what we're looking for are technologies that are going to be eligible for private investment. They're going to have that pathway to revenue. And so that's what we mean by a challenge in this context. Now, I will say, if you read this year's challenges, they were in 10 very broad areas, and they talk about a range of possible technologies we're looking for. What is not public is we have a report for each of those challenges that maps what we are asking for against all of the demand that's been input. So then when we identify proposals that are winning proposals, we'll be able to take those maps and go back to the stakeholders that articulated those needs, and all our stakeholders, but we can start with the articulated stakeholders, and then kind of have them give them the ability to track the proposals we brought in and the technology that's developing.
And so in that case, what you described there in my mind sounds a little more like what we would call a commercial solutions opening, or an open topic maybe under the SBIR program, that style of thing. Okay. And it in terms of giving out your funding, is there any requirement to treat everyone equally a little bit? Everyone's an ally, so you get this much money, you get this much money. Is there a constraint like that?
So the answer is no. We've gotten a clear mandate from the charter and from the allies that the goal here is to deliver the best solutions, and really it does no one any service to sort of just hand out billets to kind of meet some artificial set of idea of how many companies should come from every ally or something like that. Now, I will say that our goal and our intent and really the mission of Diana is to raise the innovation landscape across all of the alliance. And so it's something we think hard about. And we do that in a few ways. Number one, we work very closely with all of our stakeholders, with all of the allies, and we're focused on making sure at a minimum all of the allies and their ecosystems are aware of the opportunity and what makes a great proposal, because there is a tendency, I would say, in some nations to have a better understanding of how to even describe your technology and your business plan in a way that gets you selected. So we do have programming and efforts to make sure we're leveling up the knowledge and understanding of the startup ecosystems, even to find us and to write a successful proposal. And then the second piece, which is something we're thinking a lot about, is how we make sure that at the national level, those ecosystems are preparing themselves, to be part of Diana and beyond, and to get investor funding. And so I think we have a real opportunity there right now, because as you know, again, from the summit, we have a big commitment from all allies to spend more on defense. And one way we're talking about what that can look like for many of the allies is to increase their spending on incubation, on R&D, on really leveling up all the allies, so that we do get a great mix. I mean, so far we've gotten a fantastic mix from many of the allies, so it's turned out well, focusing on quality. But certainly there are some allies, including, of course, the United States, that has a lot of funding, a very, very developed R&D ecosystem and technology ecosystem. And so, you are going to see, the United States and some of those countries have, a higher number of innovators in the cohorts because of that. But we are working with all the allies to level up everyone.
And do you have the ability to help people partner? So if I'm a U.S. engine manufacturer, but you all know someone in Sweden or Finland or something that has really good expertise in low temperature operations, or there's this great Estonian company which knows about protecting cyber physical systems. Do you have that ability to help people find partners they may not even know exist across the industrial bases of the partner nations?
We do that in some ways, I think. So yes, and in fact, the first very happy outcome that we've seen, even from our first, so we've only had 2 cohorts go through, is how many of our cohort companies end up working together. And I think we should have anticipated that. I don't want to say we didn't, but I think we were pleasantly surprised by how much success and potential has come out of the cohort members meeting each other and then looking at opportunities to partner, to share opportunity, to kind of bridge technologies together and make a stronger, proposition for the allies. That's number one. Number two, we have a vast mentor and expert network. And so through our accelerator program and then our mentor and expert network, and if folks listening to this are interested in getting involved, through the Diana website, which I'm sure we can share, there's opportunities to submit to become part of that network. We rely on that network to provide strategic advice to the members of our cohorts. I think you're certainly, I think there's more that we can do as we build out. We have a new chief commercial officer who's come in, I think 2 months ago, Ryan Benitez, who actually comes from running accelerators with DIU in the US. And she's been working hard to think about how we have stronger programming for existing industry. Because we've had a lot of interest from the industrial base. We've had many great engagements and meetings. I think thinking about how we operationalize that, because as you point out, there's a lot of opportunity for innovators to get in on existing programs. So we do see that as a way to get to the adoption, but that's something we're building out.
And Miss Benitez is actually going to be one of our speakers at our Emerging Technologies conference coming up at the end of August, which we'll talk a little bit more about all the Diana programming there. So let's talk about transition or adoption. you and the rest of the S&T community, like the labs and the DARPAs and the DIUs, are a great front door, and you're bringing in lots of people into the front door and creating great new partnerships, seeing some good technology. Everyone wants to get to the back door. Everyone wants to get to procurement and fielding. So how does Diana help overcome that transition adoption barrier? For example, do you have procurement authority alongside R&D authority?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer the specific one first, and I'll give you the broader answer. We do not have ourselves procurement authority. We do have the authority to issue prototyping arrangements with the cohorts. So we have the ability to bring the companies in through the challenge program, and then through the rapid adoption service, we can work with allies that are interested to build more specific specifications around what they would like to see out of a prototype, and then issue contracts to actually then have companies develop or field those prototypes and validate them. So that's the end of our authorities when it comes to quote unquote procurement. However, our partner agencies, so there's the NSPA, which is the NATO Support and Procurement Agency, as well as the NCIA, the NATO Communications and Information Agency. Both of those are procurement agencies. They do outsourced procurement support for the allies, both on a multilateral and a unilateral basis or bilateral basis. And they have authorities to take prototypes that have been validated through Diana's competitive process and single source follow-on production. So there is an end-to-end structure within NATO to go from a challenge through the program, through a validated prototype, to a procurement contract at the NATO level. We've also begun talking to the allies about whether and how at a national level they would be able to leverage the competitive process that's already been completed through Diana, again, to take companies through to production without running, an additional competition that obviously, as we know, takes time and cost, and gets to that valley of death problem that you've mentioned. I will say that more philosophically, what we're trying to do is mitigate risk in different directions to bring the right players together to get past that valley of death. So what do I mean by that? When it comes to the allies, we have the test center network. We have tie-in to a lot of operational experimentation. We have the prototyping authorities. What we want to do is aggregate that on a multilateral basis, right? So one of our superpowers at Diana is we are an international organization. So it's not one nation taking a risk with their own public dollars or euros or pounds on a specific technology or solution, but we can aggregate that risk. And as I said, we also feel very proud of our evaluation process and our technical experts, because we are kind of neutral territory where we can give real opinions about the technology to make sure we're fielding stuff that has potential. The other key piece, though, gets to the investor piece, which is we want to mitigate risk for the investors, because our goal is actually to encourage the private capital community to fund the early stages of the technology development, to reduce the risk to, again, public funds for early, riskier, untested technologies. So the thinking there is that if we can tie honest, validated benchmarks and a full end-to-end procurement process, and even have that process on its way or even completed, so that, in other words, you have allies saying, we are ready to buy and field this if it works, well, then you're going to gets rid of the market risk that is so concerning to the investors. When you talk about investors getting into defense, they're not worried about technology. They take risks on technology all the time. They're worried about the technology working, and then the procurement processes taking too long or not working, and then you have the valley of death. And so for the investor, if we can use our authorities and our partnership with the allies to lower the market risk, they take on the technology risk, and then the the allies, they don't have to spend the technology funding, on this. So it lowers that risk for the allies, and everyone wins.
I'm going to have you back and we do a big comparison of tech transition adoption processes across these partner nations. You've got this unique vantage point.
Yeah.
This is a target-rich environment. There's the procurement budgets of all of these allied nations, including the U.S. But gosh, they probably all have their own bureaucratic and cultural barriers that we call the Valley of Death here.
Yeah.
And I'd love to get into a conversation about who's got CAS-covered contracts, right?
Yeah.
And who's got the best way of negotiating intellectual property rights, and how do you deal with sustainment awards? And let's do that for a different podcast if you promise to come back sometime.
Yeah, and I'll just say on that, unfortunately, when you look, and I know you're looking historically, and I think maybe now we're getting more of a focus on the transition adoption question, because historically you see so much spending on innovation, but not I don't want to ascribe any mistakes, but for whatever reason, there has not been the structuring to then take that innovation and actually get it into the hands of the warfighter, and that is the thing that we can't afford anymore.
Yeah, it's probably my fault, but thank you for not blaming me. So let's move on to the final topic, which is, so Diana is partnering, and this is great, with us at NDIA to host a bunch of breakout sessions at the upcoming Emerging Technologies for Defense conference in late August in DC. So give the listeners an overview. What kind of topics you think you're going to be talking about at the conference, and what do you hope to gain from participating in the conference?
Yeah, well, I think it starts certainly with the opportunity to talk more and in more detail about Diana and what it's trying to accomplish. We did just form 2 years ago as an entity, and I think we've had fantastic success getting traction. I think in total, we've had many thousands of proposals. I think I'll say it that way, 4,000 between the last 2 years and many thousands more this year. So we've gotten great interest, and there's obviously, a real hunger in the startup community, in the technology community, to understand how to break into this market, the defense market, the supply chain. And so they see Diana as a valuable path to do that. But what we want to make sure is that we ourselves are tied in to the right players in the defense ecosystem. And obviously NDIA is the name of the game when it comes to the United States. In my career, I had the opportunity to work in lots of ways with NDIA, including looking for the weekly email, which you can't say about many weekly emails. So I think the focus of this effort to come to the conference is really to help the industry players and the stakeholders that will be there understand what Diana is trying to accomplish. And then so that's going to be the keynote, and we're going to be in, I think, a fireside chat talking about our thinking when it comes to commercial partnerships and investment. I will say, though, I think we're also really going to be on listening mode to understand how folks within the community think we can help. Because I will say, again, this was a very exciting job for me to take. NATO has been very, very forward-leaning as an institution, which I think is something it should deserve credit for here, because big institutions don't always get that credit. But the allies have given Diana an agility and a flexibility to operate as a public entity that is not afforded all public entities all the time, let's say it that way. And so I think we have a real opportunity to shape the future of how we think about our challenges, how we, to your point, prioritize, how we work with existing programs and industry players. And so I think it will be a real opportunity to engage in a sophisticated way with the right people to think about how we can plug in better, certainly within the United States, but I think within the rest of the alliance as well.
That's great, and we're looking forward to having a bunch of the Diana folks with us in DC at the end of August, and like Tom was saying, at the keynote level, we'll be hearing from NATO. At the breakout session level, there'll be fireside chats, and they'll just be walking around, hopefully for 2.5 days, where our members and everyone attending the conference can get some time to talk about these kinds of issues. Tom, for anyone else listening to this podcast beyond attending the conference that they want to get involved in Diana's efforts to improve innovation to support NATO, what would you recommend? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so we have a lot of great opportunities, and they all start at our website, which is diana.nato.int. And we're doing a whole scale rebuild of our website, so it's going to look even cooler, I'll say it that way, soon enough. But for now, you can go there, and it's got everything you need. There are a bunch of ways to get involved with Diana. So number one, we want startups, scale-ups, commercial entities, non-traditionals to apply to our challenges. We did just complete our big challenge call for this year. It closed in July, so it's going to be a little bit of time before we open some new challenges, but people should stay tuned because I think there's a number of opportunities coming up in that space. Obviously, that's number one. Number two, for folks who are already in the market and have expertise, we have opportunities up there to join the Mentor and Expert Network. We also do now have a call for industry to come talk to us about how they would see opportunities to partner with Diana, again, on existing programs and in existing venues. So that call is also up on the website. I'll say selfishly for the Diana legal team, we have a network of law firms we're building called Diana Legal Connect. We have about 50 firms so far signed up from across the alliance, and this is so we can give trusted firms, connect them in with the innovators, because there's, as you know, a range of really significant legal issues that they need help with. So we want to make sure there's really mission-aligned firms that we can connect them with. So that opportunity is available. And then the last big one for the capital community, and this includes, we often talk about VC. Yes, of course, we want VC, but we're also looking for all kinds of capital entities, from private equity to family offices to angel investors to institutional investors, to come talk to us about our trusted investor network that we're building, again, because we see that as a way to help those investors understand the market and have a place to look for good bets. And then it helps our stakeholders spend less on the early stages and be ready just to buy the stuff that really works and succeeds. And again, then everyone scales and wins. So there you go. There's some ways to get involved.
That's great. So Tom McSorley, he's the General Counsel at NATO Diana, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. Thanks, Tom, for joining us today on the Emerging Tech Horizons podcast.
Thanks, Arun. Thank you for having us.
All right, with that, I want to make sure everyone is visiting not just Diana's website, but ETI's website to sign up for our mailing list and register for our various webinars and events, including our Tech 101 series. Check out our YouTube channel at Emerging Tech ETI to see our past podcasts, webinars, and other content. We are excited to host the third NDIA Emerging Technologies for Defense conference and exhibition that we've been talking about today. It's going to be held August 27th through 29th at the Washington, D.C. Convention Center. This year, we're going to be joined by the Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Christopher Grady, General Alex Grynkewich, the Commander of U.S. European Command, EUCOM, the Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, Michael Duffey, and the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, Emil Michael. Those are just some of our government keynote speakers, on top of multiple industry and venture capital leaders who are also going to be keynoters. And along the lines of this conversation, we're going to have Admiral Pierre Vandier, the Supreme Allied Commander for Transformation, another NATO organization working on innovation. We're also hosting over 60 breakout panels, multiple networking receptions, government industry speed dating, and much more. New this year, we're also going to be hosting a classified programming track and a multi-day hackathon. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to learn more and register now for this conference. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like our episodes and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our latest content. We're available on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. A special thank you to Melanie Yu, Daniel Park, and Logan the Intern for producing this podcast. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in to Emerging Tech Horizons.
NDIA's Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference and Exhibition is assembling innovators at the front lines of global defense. Join the 2025 ETI NDIA Hackathon, where coders, engineers, and mission partners tackle real-world national security challenges. Only at the Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference and Exhibition, NDIA's premier innovation event.